many ways in which land and land-related natural resources can exacerbate existing situations of conflict or even cause new conflict to emerge. We see that in many circumstances, increased scarcity of natural resources can lead to conflict, can lead to competition between groups, between communities, between different stakeholders at the local as well as national and international level. This is very much dependent on the conflict, and it will also be exacerbated in those contexts where governance structures are weaker and where there are already existing patterns of exclusion and marginalization of some groups over others. And then, of course, there are also cases where we're seeing potential conflict or tension emerging at the kind of transboundary level, even between countries. In particular, we've seen this in the case of sharing of water resources in contexts like Central Asia, for example, where countries have not come to fight against each other, but there's definitely been a history of tensions over the sharing of water resources. And similar examples we can see in Africa between Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, or in the context of Middle East. Also, we see the impact of natural disasters contributing to exacerbating these dynamics because, of course, they destroy livelihoods, they destroy infrastructure, and contribute to situations of scarcity or even force people to move away of their areas into other areas, entering into competition with groups and communities living there. In a way, the opposite pattern is also true, right? It's not just land causing or exacerbating conflict and insecurity, also conflict and insecurity exacerbate land degradation. How does conflict contribute to land degradation? First of all, conflict causes pollution, causes the destruction of vegetation and ecosystems. It also can increase the hunting and killing of wild animals, so it contributes to a reduction in biodiversity. And it can impede conservation activities by restricting access to certain areas, for example. In many cases, in war, the destruction of crops, pastures, and irrigation systems is a deliberate strategy from one party to weaken the other one by targeting the source of livelihoods of their population.
Overall, there's insufficient finance for land and ecosystem restoration, especially for restoration specifically designed to have positive peace outcomes. While at least 40% of intrastate conflict has a link to natural resources and land, only about 10% of global climate and peacebuilding finance goes to support land-related initiatives. In addition to too little overall funding, the types of finance are also important to consider. So currently, public finance dominates the total funding for land and ecosystem restoration. Private finance makes up a much smaller proportion, but is an important area for growth in the future. The main recipients of finance are state-level institutions. Small, context-specific projects are outside the scope of many of the major climate funds. In fragile and conflict-affected contexts in particular, there's a high need for grants and concessional finance that don't increase the debt burden. Funding that increases the debt burden in fragile settings reduces their capacity to invest in development, reconstruction, and otherwise build the resilience, ultimately leading to higher vulnerability to future crises.
Land can be a driver of conflict, conflict can be a driver of land degradation, but it's not all bleak. Land restoration, ecosystem restoration initiatives can also provide really important entry points for bringing communities together, bringing governments together, improving cooperation, improving trust, and eventually in post-conflict and fragile contexts, even kind of pave the ground for peace opportunities. Currently, there's a major momentum around land and ecosystem restoration globally, and this can be seen by the extent to which international mechanisms, including in the security and peacebuilding fields, are looking at the opportunities presented by land and ecosystems restoration to bring about peace-positive outcomes. In December in Riyadh, there will be the 16th Conference of Parties of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, and there will be a very strong focus on the question of how, again, land and ecosystem restoration can help foster the agenda on international peace as well. It will be also important for COP16 to tap into and connect the dots between the different institutional processes and initiatives that are existing, that are being implemented, and really also play a role in advancing the agenda, particularly focusing on a specific regional context. And very interesting to note, it's not just about, making these initiatives conflict sensitive, so making sure that their implementation doesn't cause more conflict, do more harm than good, but also embedding those elements into those initiatives that can actively contribute to peace.